All right, Matt, it's good to see you once again. And we're taking this time here to dive into what is going on with your team at RealPage. I know you've done a lot of great stuff in the sales development leadership space. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. We want to just kick things off with always the interesting question we have here, which is what is an experiment that you're running right now that's been really exciting?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm very excited for this discussion. I think, one of the things that we've been trying over this year, over the last 8 months, is we've typically historically been aligning our SDRs to a specific AE, to a group of AEs covering a certain aspect of our business. And so far this year, one of the things that we decided to do was to break up those teams and have one team focused on driving that AE to SDR relationship and basically doing an account based model within those accounts. But then we've also have this group of product focused SDRs that are running horizontally through all accounts. And what we're actually seeing through this is that those groups, we're seeing higher conversion rates on those products. And we don't know if that happens to be the needs within the market, or if that happens to be just that the SDRs have one thing to focus on. They get really, really lethal at that one conversation. And that keeps them from diluting the conversation or driving it in a certain direction. And then I think we're finding actual business problems that we're solving, which is leading to those higher conversions.
I want to unpack that a little bit more because you think that it's the one thing that they're focusing on, and I would probably believe that that is the case, right? I like to think of it as like, I don't know if you've been to Golden Corral before,
Yeah.
or yeah, okay, so like that's how I treat it. It's like some reps are Golden Corral where they have to know about like 20 different products. Can they do it? Yes, but you don't go to Golden Corral just to get the ribs. You don't go to Golden Corral just to get the fries. Like you're like, I'm gonna get everything, and they're not the top quality, but you will get everything. And I do believe that if you have that specialization, you can really speak to that buyer, especially in a market right now where people are more cautious. They don't want to buy as many things as they used to. And you can come in and say, hey, no, this is what we do really well, right? It's like, shout out to Longhorns. We go there quite often. Like their steak is good, right? That's what they're known for. So you go there for that. You're probably not going to get anything else, right? And so that's like the way that I look at it. And it sounds like that's what your team's doing to get those conversions.
Yeah, I think when you take a really early in career sales professional who has to learn sales, has to learn the market, has to learn the industry, the products, you give them one singular, focus, and they ramp quicker, they're more confident, their conversations get better, their questions get better, their understanding gets better. So I think we tend to find that reps get productive a lot faster when they're focused on one thing, and then we add things over time. So but yeah, I love the Golden Corral analogy.
Hey, if anyone's
I've
listening,
been
like
there
Golden
forever, but
yeah, it's like it's a good spot, but at the same time, if you want quality, that's not where you're going. We all can agree to that, right? So tell me about your team though. Walk me through the outbound strategy of your team. Are you account based? Are you in pods? Everyone's different nowadays, so talk to us about that.
yeah, we have a two or three of our teams are focused on the account based model, to where we are running specific strategies within those accounts. Where RealPage is a very unique organization in terms of there's only so many people that own enough real estate to need our technology, and so we have to be hyper focused, personalized within our outreach and within our approach. And so that's why we have this one, a majority of the team focused on hyper personalized outreach and finding actual business problems and challenges that we can solve, as opposed to just a product pitch or whatever. And then, like I mentioned, we do have this one group that's focused on directly calling into one product, on one product, which we're seeing higher conversion rates. But I think that there's still definitely a need for the account-based model and for the a hyper-personalized approach. But that's kind of how we have it laid out and structured at this point.
For clarification, I know when people hear the account based model, they are like, okay, yeah, you're giving your reps accounts. Who's making that decision? Are you as leaders giving the accounts to the reps? Do the reps get to pick? Does marketing pick? Can they add more accounts if they want to?
Great question. We have the account reps, the AEs
Okay.
dictating which accounts for them to focus on. So they're strategizing a meeting once a week to take a look at their account base. Hey, here's my, call it 100 accounts. I'm going to take these 25 very strategic. These are my top 25, and then I'll give these to 75 to my SDR, who's going to do strategic outreach into them. But again, going back to the unique beast of RealPage is that our relationships are very deep within the accounts. A lot of our account reps have been here for a long time, have deep relationships, and so again, that's why we want them paired with them and them giving them accounts to focus on, because there's a lot of different sales cycles that could be happening at any point in time.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense in that. Now let's say I don't think this is going to happen often, but I'm curious because I know some SDRs or BDRs or whatever your acronym is in your organization. You're probably wondering, well, what if my AE or account rep picks accounts that I don't think are best fits? Are there disputes that happen, and how do you handle these disputes?
Yes, plenty of disputes. We typically, as managers, we're directly aligned with the RVPs that are over those specific territories. And so if there are certain situations that arise, we can always go to them and have an open dialogue about it. But typically our account reps have very good reasons for it, whether it be an opportunity that we have open, a conversation that maybe they had 3 or 6 months ago, and they mentioned that we need to, reach out later in the year. So there's usually a really good reason when they're saying, let's hold off on this account. But we also, we don't just line them up with a one-to-one model. Some of our reps have 4 or 5 account reps based on the amount of accounts. We don't think of it as the amount of accounts they're assigned, but how many accounts are we allowed to work?
Got it.
So that's how we segment it.
Okay. No, that makes complete sense. Making sure there's no internal fighting. That can happen. So we got to make sure that's not the case. So last year, you were able to create 130 million in pipeline. And through that, I'm very curious, what are the channels that were helpful to convert those opportunities? Have you seen that change now that we're well into halfway in the year for 2023? Would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Man, it's just good old picking up the phone and calling people.
Yeah. So cold calling's not dead. I don't know. People are saying it's dead, man. I don't know what's going
on. No. And I think that, there's something that we all learned in COVID is that like the virtual world works, but there's something about picking up the phone and having a conversation with somebody that is super valuable. Even looking at last year versus this year, we're seeing 60-70% of our appointments come from the phone versus email. And we've got good personalized emailing techniques. We've made some strategic investments to get training on that, and we're constantly working with reps on it and stuff. But I think that just picking up the phone, being a human being, making that connection. We're doing stuff on LinkedIn. We're doing stuff on email as well. What's really interesting, once I got into, I would say I'm a senior director now. So once I started moving up higher than manager within the ranks, I started to really get pummeled by communication. And I think one of the main things that I'm noticing in the industry is I get maybe cold called twice a week, but I get 15 emails a day, So it's like, the noise, everybody wants to get really good at email and focus on the email and LinkedIn and all of that. But there's so much noise that happens there that there's not that much noise happening on the phone, because it's harder to get the volume. It's harder for people to pick up. It's easier for them to brush you away. But I delete 10 emails before I get out of bed. It's just like, that's how it happens,
Okay, so cold calling was the reason you got that pipeline. So people listening in, it's not dead. You heard it here first. Now I want to talk about, you said breaking through the noise. What are like 3 to 5 skills that a rep should be learning right now and implementing in their strategy to break through the noise?
Great question. You have to understand that you're reaching out to a person. And I think there are amazing tools out there right now that you can use to scale your activity. But especially when you're reaching out to sales leaders, we are teaching people how to not be scripted and stand out that way, right? And so, like, you have to have a clear message and a clear reason on why now, and why makes sense for you to take the time.
Right.
I don't think this is going to be a little side tangent, but I get hit up all the time for like $10, $15 Starbucks gift cards for 20 minutes of my time.
Not
like,
a fan?
No, I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, but my 30 minutes, is worth more than a $5 cup of coffee or $20 cup of coffee, I guess, from Starbucks.
Yeah.
But I think that there are certain instances where that kind of stuff makes sense. Like if we train the team, like if one of your prospects just closed on a new property, send them a bottle of champagne. Like, send them a personalized video saying, hey, congratulations, I saw this. I'm sure it went through a bunch of work. Where can I send this bottle of champagne? Do something personal, like a personal gift or something like that. But so I think having the human approach, thinking about them as a human, what are they doing? What do they care about? How's my product or service going to make their life easier? And then communicating that in a way. So I think that's number one. I think number two is understand the business problems that your product or solution helps, right?
Yeah.
Like, it solves, because there's too many features and functions and benefits going around, and it's Matt Petrowski, who's my boss, says all the time, like, there's not an executive out there today that woke up wanting to buy software, but they did want to make their business better.
Yep.
And so if you can approach that conversation with less of a product focus and more of this is the problem it's going to solve, you'll be way more lethal. And I think the last one is don't put yourself in the box of a cadence. Like, the cadence is there to keep you on track. The cadence is there to help you scale the activity. The cadence is there to not forget about stuff. But just because it says to send this email or do it at this time doesn't mean that you have to. And I think it's funny, like, I'll have reps that come to me and say, like, hey, I'm not getting hold of people. And I'll say, okay, I'll use our SalesLoft platform and pull up the analytics and look at when they're making dials. And it's like, you can see the clear 2 blocks of the day that they're making dials in. And it's like, okay, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So try, and I'm like, pull up my calendar, pull up Jack Weber's, our SVP's calendar. Like, look at when we're available, and then build your call blocks around those times. It's early in the morning, it's lunchtime, it's late in the afternoon. That way you're not, again, feeding into the noise.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was good.
No, I think the main thing is that, like, it's about time blocking and it's about being proficient. And I think a lot of people, when they're doing certain skill sets, they're not doing those things, right? And I think that's applicable to any role, especially if in the hybrid role that we're in now. You have to make sure that you're doing those things so you don't get distracted. So you mentioned a couple skill sets that you think reps should be doing in your interviewing process. Is that you have a good amount of people on your team. What are you looking for? And then how do you enable them and onboard them appropriately so they can hit those 30, 60, 90 goals?
Well, starting with what we're looking for in applicants, like, we look for people who, we look for optimistic people. This is a very optimistic career path. If you get hung up on on the 1 or 2 people that get mad at you, you're in for a very long career. So we're looking for optimism. We're looking for external drive. We're looking for people who are driven and have a history of being driven. Like, I share this all the time. I think it was in 5th grade. I had a fish tank, and these fish started overproducing, and I had a ton of fish. And this was back when Craigslist was a thing. I was selling scoops of fish for $20 off Craigslist, and I was making like $100 a week. But like that's the kind of stuff that I want to know about. Like, what do you have a history of selling? Do you have a history of trying to think outside the box and trying to, do that kind of stuff? And then, honestly, just somebody who's focused on learning. Like, you will not have a long career in sales if you're not constantly feeding yourself full of information externally. Like, there's just so many channels like this that you can learn from. And so we always ask people, like, hey, what's something that you've had to learn, and how did you teach yourself that? Because I think that's an incredibly important skill in sales, is being able to learn something and then regurgitate it in a way that everyone can understand. That can be super, super powerful.
When you're thinking about once they get onboarded, let's say the 30, 60, 90, how can you tell when they're going to be a really good rep versus this person's not going to be as good as I thought?
Honestly, the amount of questions that get asked in the process, the attention to detail. If I find a rep that I'm having to constantly go over the same exact topics over and over, and they're just not quite clicking, that can be something. I think people who want to just show up, punch in, punch out, and leave, I see that. And then honestly, I get a lot of feedback from the other managers that they support, the account reps. I've done what I think a pretty good job building internal relationships with the reps that we support, which will give me that very candid feedback. But I think, they get paired up with reps all the time, and they themselves have worked through the program and know what to look for. And sometimes there's no better feedback that you can get than from those guys and ladies that have raised through the ranks and, can tell you like, hey, there's something about this that's not clicking.
Yeah. I that's a huge sign. It's like the more that they're progressive with their questions, the more that they're asking, those are things that are going to be incredibly important. So let's then ask that question around, okay, you have someone asking a lot of questions. That means you're going to have to be able to coach them appropriately. So you've hit a lot of goals where you've hit over 100% and things of that nature in the past year. What are the coaching techniques that you are doing yourself? And what are you telling your other leaders to do to make sure that people, when they do ask these questions, you're giving them the right coaching so they can be successful?
Yeah. We have to inspect what they expect us to inspect.
Okay. That's a deep one to talk to us.
That's a Matt Buchalski phrase right there, but it's so true, right? Like you have to know their business as much as they do. And you have to be able to say like, hey, we say it all the time. Like if everyone did their jobs right, we wouldn't have jobs. And so, you have to constantly get in the weeds with them. You have to dig through stuff, hey, you only connected to 5 people this week. Okay. Why? How many cell phone numbers have you called? What times are you calling? Who are you calling? Right? Are you switching up the times you're calling? Are you only calling? How many email steps have you skipped? When you're sending the emails, what's the content look like? What are the subject lines? What's the call to action? Are you providing a scheduling link in there? There's just all these little nuances that if you just unpack that with everybody and you inspect everything, then you'll see that quality, start to lift. But I think one of the things that with my leadership team that we're constantly stressing is, in the SDR role, it's my philosophy. We have 2 products, people and pipeline. And if the people get to where they need to be, the pipeline will follow. And so all we do is centered around training and development. So, I would say 80% of what we do is training. We train every single day. We have sales scan. We have what we call skill mills, where we're training Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We're training on just objection handling, email replies, subject lines, like you name it. Thursday will be some sort of a product type training, or industry focused training. And then Friday we have what's called tactical session, and it's an hour time block. It's an optional meeting for the reps. Bring a call recording, bring an email that needs replied to. Let's all kind of brain think it, which has been really helpful. And then we have just a consistent onboarding program all the way through until they get promoted.
Awesome. I love what you said, skill mills is what you call that?
Yeah. Just 30-minute sessions, right? Like objection popcorn, just random things that you can do, just to get the juices flowing before everybody, jumps out on their phones.
I love that. I feel like that those sessions don't happen enough, and that continuously enhances everyone in the organization, gets people excited, hear things that maybe you haven't heard before. I remember when I was an SDR manager, we did something similar to that. It was once a week on Thursday, we would do something takeaway Thursday, and we just would do sessions like that to get people prepared. So as we wrap all this up, what's like your one piece of sage advice here? You've led a lot of sales development teams. You're really deep into the outbound strategy that you'd recommend leaders start looking at to refine their outbound technique, strategy, and how they're going about their cadences right now.
Something I'm incredibly passionate about is practice.
Okay.
And I say this all the time, right? Like, yeah, everybody's seen by now The Last Dance.
Yeah, I would hope. If
right?
you haven't, I don't know what you're doing.
If you haven't, you're in sales, you're missing out. But you think about Michael Jordan and you think about the level at which he was able to achieve. Kobe Bryant, another great one, right? You look at those two guys, they didn't practice their free throws during the game. They were in the gym till 5:30 practice, or not 5:30, later than that, practicing every single day so that when they got to the game, they made the free throws. And I think there's way too many SDR teams that practice during the game. And then their conversion rates are lower, their opportunities creation's lower, everything's lower because they're not at 100%, And so value and put a lot of time and focus on the practice, and you'll see the results be the way lifted.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Yeah, if they were practicing in the game, that's not going to work. You're going to get absolutely obliterated. And they didn't do that. So that's why they were able to win. So Matt, appreciate your time here. Thanks so much for the great advice. And we'll see you on the next one.